3 missiles, 17 seconds, one decision that changed everything. At 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, alarms screamed across 3 continents. From the skies over Israel to the waters near Bahrain, to the border towns of Turkey, the world witnessed what military analysts are calling the most dangerous escalation between the United States and Iran in over 4 decades. But here's what they're not telling you on the evening news. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind exactly 48 hours before those missiles lit up the night sky. It started with intelligence, the kind of intelligence that lands on a president's desk with a single word stamped in red: imminent. The strike order was precise: 4 targets, multiple delivery systems. The official statement called it a proportional response to threats against American interests. But proportional is a relative term when you're dealing with a regional powder keg that's been smoldering for 43 years. Within 6 hours of the American strikes, Iran's supreme leader made a statement that sent shivers through intelligence agencies worldwide. Not a threat. It's not a warning. A promise. He said, and I quote, "Our response will be felt in ways they cannot yet imagine." And he wasn't exaggerating. By market opening in New York, Brent crude oil had spiked by $18 per barrel. That's a 23% increase overnight. To put that in perspective, the average American household spends roughly $3,000 annually on gasoline. That spike? It translates to an additional $690 per year per family. Multiply that across 330 million Americans, and you're looking at over $200 billion sucked out of the economy in increased energy costs alone. But the economic shockwave was just the opening act. What came next was the part that keeps Pentagon officials awake at night. 72 hours after the American strikes, the retaliation began. Not from Iran directly, that would be too predictable. Instead, it came from what military strategists call proxies, armed groups loyal to Tehran operating across 6 different countries. The sophistication of the response shocked even seasoned intelligence veterans. Let me break down what happened in those 6 chaotic hours. In northern Israel, 3 missiles were intercepted by the Iron Dome system, but debris from the intercepts injured 27 civilians in Haifa. In Bahrain, home to the U.S. Fifth Fleet, a drone strike targeted an American logistics facility, injuring 12 personnel. And here's where it gets particularly concerning. In Turkey, a NATO ally, missiles landed within 3 kilometers of the Incirlik Air Base, where the United States stores an estimated 50 B-61 nuclear gravity bombs. 50 nuclear weapons. 3 kilometers. Think about that for a moment. For the people living in these regions, the statistics became personal. Sarah Goldstein, a schoolteacher in Haifa, was walking her dog when the sirens went off. She had 15 seconds to find shelter. In an interview 3 days later, she said something that stuck with me. You don't hear the missile. You hear the silence after the siren stops, and you're counting in your head, wondering if you counted fast enough. But while families huddled in bomb shelters, another front was opening, one that might ultimately prove more consequential than the missiles themselves. The economic warfare had begun in earnest. Here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean deeply troubling. Within 72 hours of the escalation, 3 things happened that rewrote the global economic playbook. First, European nations, fearing a complete cutoff of Middle Eastern oil, began quietly loosening sanctions on Russia, desperate to secure alternative energy supplies. That's a geopolitical earthquake that reverberates far beyond this immediate conflict. Second, insurance rates for shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, through which 21% of the world's petroleum passes daily, increased by 340%. Third, and perhaps most significantly, China announced it would be increasing its strategic oil purchases from Iran, effectively providing Tehran with an economic lifeline that undermines 40 years of Western sanctions policy. The numbers tell a story that headlines can't capture. Every day, approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz. That's about 35% of all seaborne traded oil. If Iran were to block that strait, even for a week, the global economy would face a crisis that makes the 2008 financial collapse look like a practice run. Now here's where the story takes a turn that might surprise you. While missiles flew and markets tumbled, something remarkable was happening back in the United States. The American public was reaching a conclusion that differed sharply from their government's actions. 59%, that's not a slim majority, That's a decisive rejection of the administration's approach. But here's the detail that pollsters found most striking. When you break down that 59%, you find something unusual. It's not divided along traditional party lines. Republicans at 48% disapproval, Democrats at 67%. But here's the kicker. Independents, the voters who decide elections, sitting at 63% disapproval. I want you to listen to this quote from General Michael Patterson, retired, a man who served 3 tours in the Middle East. He said, "I've seen this movie before. Different actors, same ending. We go in with the best intentions and the finest military in the world, but we're playing checkers while they're playing chess across generations." The general's observation cuts to something deeper. This isn't the first time America has found itself in this position. Cast your mind back to 1987, the tanker war in the Persian Gulf, or 2003, the invasion of Iraq, or 2011, Libya. Each time, the initial action seemed justified, proportional, necessary. Each time, the consequences spiraled in ways that intelligence briefings never predicted. But there's a pattern here that's worth examining. When the first Gulf War started in 1991, President Bush had an approval rating of 76% for the military action. By 2003, when we invaded Iraq, that number for President Bush was 69%. The 2011 Libya intervention under President Obama, 47% approval. Today, 38% approve of the current strikes. That's not just a downward trend, that's a fundamental shift in how Americans view military intervention in the Middle East. We've gone from overwhelming support to significant skepticism in just over 3 decades. The question is, are policymakers paying attention? The statistics and polling data, as important as they are, can obscure something fundamental. Behind every percentage point, there's a human being whose life has been irreversibly changed. Dr. Reza Ahmadi works in a hospital in Tehran that treated civilians injured in the American strikes. In a rare interview, he described what he called the 20-minute patients, people who were going about their ordinary lives when the missiles hit. A baker preparing bread for the morning rush, a taxi driver finishing his night shift, a university student studying for exams. 20 minutes, that's the average time they had between being regular people with regular problems and becoming casualties of a geopolitical chess match they never signed up to play. On the other side, in Israel, the Goldstein family, who we met earlier, has made a decision that 10,000 other Israeli families have made in the past week. They're leaving. Not permanently, they hope, but until things settle down. Their daughter's school has been closed 3 times in 8 days due to rocket alerts. Their son asked his mother a question that no 8-year-old should have to ask. "Mommy, what happens if the alarm goes off but we're in the car?" These aren't theoretical scenarios. These aren't war game simulations. These are the ripple effects that spread outward from decisions made in secure rooms by people who will never hear those air raid sirens personally. So where does this leave us? As I record this, it's been 8 days since those initial strikes. The missiles have stopped. For now. Markets have begun to stabilize. The oil remains at elevated prices. The diplomatic channels are buzzing with backdoor negotiations. Both sides are saying the right things about de-escalation. But here's what history teaches us. Escalations like this don't end, they pause. The next provocation is already being planned, the next response already being wargamed in situation rooms from Washington to Tehran. The question isn't whether there will be a next chapter. The question is whether we'll learn anything from this one before it's written. 59% of Americans have doubts about the current strategy. Families across 3 continents are sleeping less soundly. And somewhere in the Middle East right now, someone is making a decision that will determine whether those 3 missiles in 17 seconds were the beginning of something or just another verse in a song we've been singing for 43 years. The only certainty is this. The next time those sirens sound, we'll have even less time to ask whether we should have seen it coming.